it tells me it's football season. So that it was good Monday to get back over there and have some guys up front, and you feel like we're really off now. Like there's these like phases in the build up toward the season, and Monday felt like the first day of school in a lot of ways, and that's a good feeling. Except I didn't have to take the photo on the porch with my mom and have her work with my hair and all that, so that's all right.
Can we get one of those with all the Husker 24/7 guys? Just all you guys taking a photo on a porch?
Shoot.
Yeah, we should have done that through the years. What people could see us age poorly, but yeah. So that's how it felt though, and that's a good feeling to have in the stomach. Like when Luke Lindenmeyer said, the night before fall camp Sunday, they're in the meeting and he had goosebumps. I just think there is that sort of juice within the locker room about this team and what they can be, and sort of that excitement to actually get after it.
Yeah. So and I couldn't. We were speaking of pictures. We had to take some pictures, and I had a colleague that was knee deep in the press conference, so I was sent to go get him, and I had to say, "Hey, Kyle, we've got pictures we have to take. You can't be at the press conference right now. You're going to see him 226,000 more times. Can we go?" But it was captivating because I felt like, for as little as I got to hear live being there, it was interesting to hear him reflect on where they had been and yet be able to lament on where they're going, right? Like he separated kind of the journey and the process from what he thinks they're capable of. I don't know if that's just the speaking ability, but I did like the connection, but still moving forward.
Oh yeah, are you talking about Rhule or Lindenmeyer? Because both
Rhule.
kind of,
They
yeah,
both did it.
yeah. Yeah, well, I guess the takeaway I had, and this is a good thing, and this, you could have played the old drinking game with the player-led conversation. The media was feeding it too, and it was, going back and forth. Um, but his players do sound like him, kind
Yeah,
of,
yeah.
which is usually a good trait in a team. It's sort of, I. Sometimes in the media, it's not always perfect when everybody sounds like a record playing the same song. But I think that is usually a good sign that the players know what's expected. They see the standard that the coach has established. They're in on it, and they can explain it in much the same way the coach can. And you heard that in Las Vegas too, right? When Rhule got up front and he's like, "Hey, I could put Latovsky or Raiola up here, and they could handle it." They said, I could say the same thing as you, coach, sort of deal. So I think that's something that kind of jumps out at me about where they're at and why there's probably that. I don't even know if it's quiet confidence. I just think it's confidence in what they can be this year. And that's the way you want it to be less than 30 days out from this season. You want a team that is walking tall, and I think the competition each day at practice feeds that too. I just think it's a deeper team than it probably has been the last couple of years. We've talked about it with the secondary, like last week. Like I think the second line and the secondary is going to push the first line more than it ever has since I've covered it in a long while. And I think if you go through the position groups, a lot of them, you could say the same thing.
Okay, so here's the interesting thing. What about so depth came up in the stream, and we were talking about, Nebraska's depth. Why do you feel comfortable talking about depth in this year, even though, and I agree with you for the record, but it's still kind of untested and unproven. Why do you think now, in kind of this timid stage we are as a fan base, and we haven't had a ton of success lately, like, why do you think we're comfortable now talking about depth, even though they haven't really played?
Because they have a lot of guys in this era in college football where the portal's so active. It wasn't near as active around here as far as guys leaving as some might have expected, like back in December. And if you think about the roster, at one point Rhule was asked about it being a young team, and it is youngish on paper. I agree with that. Like we've been over that on the show. Like there's only 34 some juniors and seniors, the rest are
Yep.
sophomore on down. But a lot of those sophomores on down, when you look at them, you're like, oh, that guy's been here. This is year 3 for him, maybe. Like he's a third-year sophomore, or it's at least year 2 where there's that understanding of, I believe I can play at this level now. I've shown it in practices. And now you can sometimes take that next step off of that platform where you've built that confidence, where you're not kind of going out there like the first year, like, do I belong? I think there's more guys who are past that phase. So that's why I say it. But your point within the question is a fair one in that I feel that way. And yet it is that intriguing dynamic of there is some unproven guys that we're talking about.
Yeah.
When we speak of that depth. So they've got to go show that that's valid when it counts now.
BC, we've talked a lot about on the show this morning, like history versus reality, the fear of kind of what Nebraska's been or had in the past or who they've lost to in the past versus the reality of this year's team. How do you kind of separate, as obviously somebody that's grown up here and knows the history and has experienced up close and personal the struggles of the last 10 years versus like what you actually think this team is?
Yeah, it's one of the toughest challenges I think the coaching staff has at Nebraska is because, and this is sometimes a good thing, it is a place that cares a lot about what came before, and that obviously that can be a really good quality. Sometimes though, there's sort of with that, there can be that, well, this happened last year, so I think this is going to happen again the next year feeling where it's like, oh, it's just going to transfer over because that's the way it's been for so long. And I thought Rhule had a point in Las Vegas that was interesting about this team. The best thing they can do, he said, is stop talking about yesterday or what happened before. It's just what are you doing today? What's tomorrow, basically. And then, that kind of goes with the whole close game conversation. We've written the stories and talked, and they were 2-5 in the 1-score games last year and all that. But Rhule's point is they weren't good enough yet. Get a little bit better. He thinks they're a little bit better. So you win those games. And maybe actually those don't end up 1-score stats in 25 if you're actually as good as you can be and everybody maxes out and you win by 14. So I do think, though, when Rhule took this job, it was quickly realized that's one of the biggest hurdles to overcome is within the fans and sort of the clouds that hang over the program of the last decade or so. There's going to be reminders when there is a wrong turn on any given week of, oh, this happened last year, so it might happen again. I think he realized that the first game he coached at Nebraska, Minnesota, was a game up in Minneapolis. The Huskers probably should have won, leading 10-3 with like 5 minutes left. They lose it, and immediately he knows that like he's probably for worse getting what happened before him put on his back too, and so that's something they've had to work past. I think it helps though that you've got new portal guys who didn't experience the last couple of years, and you've got guys like Raiola and stuff who I just think they see last year as, hey, it was a learning experience and some of those losses, and I'm going to use that to help me in those kind of games moving forward.
Yeah, it's interesting. He tugged at my it's not even my heartstrings, just the ability to recollect, because we have this revisionist history, and it's not, and I'm not saying that as a negative because we won a ton of games. But 94 was pretty ugly. 93 was kind of ugly. Like we weren't like this fine offense. There was a couple of practices, I think, where guys will tell you where we had to start over, and he pulled the team off the field. Offensively, we weren't a mess, but we weren't 95, right? So we were down at the half against Wyoming, and I remember the conversation being, we're not playing to the standard, and he went down the road of kind of what we're capable of. We didn't really have a Rolodex to tap back into to kind of self-police. So I say that to say I felt it was interesting for him to revisit last year at a 13-6, 13-7 game between Ohio State and UCLA, but still be optimistic about this year. Like, is he using that? Does he do that as a, hey, remember when? Like, you can remember history, but don't be held captive by it. Like, how he dances that dance is pretty not unique, but it's intriguing to me to see how they respond.
It's also, I think you can say to your team, like, hey, why fall into that dynamic of like the UCLA game that he brought up? It was what, 13-7 at halftime.
That was our final in '94. People forget about that, right? When we went to Pasadena, like that was ugly, or 13-10 or whatever it was. Remember, like we had some of those, and it's like you do learn to push through that. But I don't know if we talked about it openly. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Yeah, the '94 UCLA game. I was even thinking of UCLA last year because Rhule kind of brought it up.
Well, that too.
You know, where, that game was 13-7 at the half, I think, and the feeling within the stadium last year, that is, was like this is bleak. It did feel that way, and I think the team felt it. And he mentioned that, like in the locker room, it just wasn't the same as the week before at Ohio State, before the bye week, when Hull made the kick and everybody's, he said it was like a revival. Everybody was on fire, like we're going to win this game. And so I do think, go back to the past a little bit and be like, guys, why was that the way it was against UCLA? It didn't need to be that way. You have confidence in the next play and what you can get done. But that is an example, I think, of what this program will have to overcome this year, is in the stadium, especially in Lincoln, when there's days like that UCLA game last year, there is sometimes that feeling in the air. You can feel it come down to the field a little bit, like, okay, I've seen this before. And so that's where you got to fight through it and have those guys who are like, no, this is a new team. This is a new opportunity. This is my shot at it with these guys. And whatever happened last year in 1994, so what now? Let's go get it. And I do think there is that usefulness of, there are some of those second, third year guys meshed with guys who didn't even experience any of that. So some of that history we always talk about isn't their history at all. So they don't give two figs about it, right? So that I think sometimes, I mean, that can help, like, to have those guys like Dane Key, like he's just like, this is my first time in Nebraska. Let's just go get it. Like that works sometimes.
I do think there is enough injection, but Maryland at home felt a lot like UCLA at home last year. Maryland and UCLA at home felt a lot like Minnesota bringing 65 guys here to Lincoln a handful of years ago. You know what I mean? So I do like Tim Miles, right? Don't put that crap on me, with new young guys that haven't been there, because he's developing guys and he's recruiting guys that couldn't really care less. Like they were brought here to be part of the answer, not the problem.
Don't put that crap on me.
Yep. That's a good way to put it. And so that's what you're hoping for. And that's where you're like, okay, let's look forward and not behind.
That's what he talked about with Dylan's recruitment, right?
Yeah.
I thought that was a little interesting nugget.
Yeah. I thought the whole thing with Dylan was interesting in Las Vegas, of just like, and he's talked about it before, but it's always interesting about just like, come be a part of going through the tough stuff and building this program up. And, that it'll make you like a better pro, like in the future. Like you were that guy who already had to take a program that was sort of middling or had to figure out some answers to some tough stuff. And you were a central part of that. And that's already in your background because you did it at Nebraska. And I wrote a column about it. Like when Dylan was up front in Las Vegas, he got like 2 or 3 questions in a row, like from Ohio State guys. And it was sort of about like not going there and all this stuff. And it kind of made me step back a little bit. And I have always appreciated his story, but it's worth reminding yourself, we're watching a cool story unfold of him coming back to his dad's alma mater with a program that was scuffling a bit and wanting to be a part of the solution and sticking with it. And, there's obviously any place you're quarterback, you're going to take your lumps and take your hits. If you lose a game at Ohio State, you're going to get knocked around pretty good that week around town. So that's a pressure-filled job too. But I just love the story that's in front of us there's a 5-star quarterback in his second year trying to learn from his first year lessons at his dad's old school, and it means a lot to him to get this program back into the elite, into the playoff discussion. And sometimes you got to step back from the forest a bit and look at that and be like, that's a cool story we're about to watch. However it goes, you got to admire that he's taking on that task.
So, do you remember the question about what prompted the discussion about Mekhi Nelson? Was it the who's number 2, the establishing Emmett? Was that still the same part of that answer? I can't remember.
Yeah, when he said he can be one of the more explosive guys, I think was it was sort of about like just how do you feel about your running back depth right now going into it.
So to your point, over the weekend I was just talking with Mekhi, and one of the things that he said, and I just wonder if you think this is part of what you're talking about. So, Coach Barthel was one of the guys that offered. Coach Rhule saw him in person and was like, hey, if we pick you, like, you're it. Like, this is how you have to think. And he was talking about one of the things that he's looking forward to is he wants to be part of change, right? He wants to he sees the relationship between like Amir and Emmett, and he wants like, Amir or some of these old guys. He's like, DB, you could do this. And like he has this thing where there's this competitive deal where he understands the tradition of the position, but he wants to not only be a part of it, but like change the narrative. And I don't think he's alone. How intentional is it, do you think, when Coach Rhule is so active in recruiting and his staff is real similar, that's the message that the young guys are getting? It's not just the Dylans like come be about it. It seems to be almost to a man of these new young guys that they brought into the program in terms of their mindset, not just their physical ability.
Yeah, I think it's a big part of it. And I do think there's a good number of recruits out there who that's going to appeal to their competitive spirits. Be like, yeah, there's certain guys who are afforded the opportunity to go to a place that was like in the CFP last year or a Georgia type program. And that's big time too, to like go chase championships from schools that have been in it recently. But there is I think a special component that Nebraska can offer, kind of in a rare category where there is a great history to the program that a recruit can see, but also it hasn't been there as much recently. And the idea like, hey man, you can come be that crew that changes the whole story back and puts it back where it's supposed to be. You could say like the rightful place as people around here think about it, amongst the elite. And I don't know, if I'm a guy like who thinks I'm pretty good at football and a competitor, I'm taking that message and thinking that'd be pretty sweet, to like be that kind of guy who changes things. So it's like with Dylan and some of these guys, Mekhi.
He practices competitively. Dylan practices competitively. Like I know, again, the guy in my house I know practices competitively. Donovan Jones is there just seems to be these competitive guys that don't typically blink. You know what I mean? And there's a lot. I mean, if you watch Shavers, like he's a menace.
McGahee.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like maybe it was guys didn't want him enough, or they couldn't just find it. But they are competitive practice guys.
Well, you've got guys in the last couple of classes that came to a program where they know it's not going to be handed to them. They know that it's in a certain state where you've got to keep building this up. That now they trust the staff and their vision that it's going to get better and like the success they're going to have. But they know they have to be, the straw that stirs that drink when you get down to it. And that's why the player-led thing comes up so much. I mean, you can have good coaching and a good vision, but you still got to have those guys who, like in July, want to do the extra stuff when no one's around. And from the outside looking in, it seems like they have that. I realize it's the time of season where everybody's kind of an optimist and drinks a little Kool-Aid, so that goes with it, I guess. But I truly believe that they've got a great culture over there, and you would suspect that at some point, that's going to connect with this push and a bump in results too.
Right. I mean, let's just use Jeremiah Charles. Right. Kind of after maybe I'm misremembering, but it seemed like after the dunk contest at the Devaney, right? And everybody's, ooh, explosive, really, really good athlete. And then, Nebraska staff kind of talked about him a little bit. And, Jeremiah Charles is coming. And he was one of the young guys that played early and he showed flashes and then kind of, was demoted a little bit, got benched. Wasn't even the first young corner off the bench in the bowl game post UCLA. And to hear D. Singleton single him out about his tenaciousness and kind of staying with it, like that has to be in the culture, but more so it has to be in your DNA too, right? As a player, because I don't know if you know this, but after being benched against UCLA, it's hard to come back from. Not that I know, but like you have to have some of that in you already, and if there is that in these guys, then they definitely have a chance, especially if it's competitive and deep as we think it could be, even with unproven guys. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does to me. I mean, go back to the portal. There weren't that many guys who left, and there were guys who could have talked tail and left. I mean, there were. Like, Jeremiah Charles could have done that. Like, a Bryce Turner could have done that.
Demetrius Bell could have done it.
Yep. Gage Stinger, I know when Raiola was listing off like the 7 or 8 guys, kind of leadership council type guys, like in the spring or whenever it was, he was one of the guys. And he hasn't played a ton on defense or like how it has been maybe as he suspected coming out. And
Superman crush on Gage Stinger, by the way, BC.
Yeah.
I just do.
I'm intrigued what kind of role he can carve out in especially, I'm really interested too with like who's all on special teams and like how it's gonna look. But you could list off like a 15, 20 guys like we're going through here that have been through some stuff where it didn't just happen at a snap of a finger. And I would say Nebraska had a higher percentage than most places, and I feel this is definitely true, that did not just head out the door when it didn't happen the first couple of years. And so I think back to the tying the whole conversation together in depth and all this stuff and why there's this hope in year 3 and this optimism. It's because you do have those guys who have worked through the hard stuff, and now, you see if some of the fruits of their labor is going to show up.
Yeah, BC, I mean, I know when we talk about depth, I'm very optimistic about their depth at a lot of spots. But I look at it and I go, okay, maybe going back to, the 90s or whenever, maybe this wouldn't have qualified as good depth then. But I look around the rest of college football. I would have. I look around the rest of college football and I go, okay, maybe we haven't seen some of these guys maybe as much as we would like to. But you also have to look at the comparison to the rest of college football where you say, hey, Nebraska has guys that have been here for multiple years in backup positions. And it's not because they're not good enough, it's because they're young. And you look around the rest of college football, that's not very common. You don't have guys.
And you wouldn't have known we had depth if we didn't play.
Right.
Right. You still have to have the opportunity, and they could still have it.
Yeah. And honestly, for a lot of those guys, I think that's this year that we see that. But I think we sometimes struggle to, put in perspective what the rest of college football is going through, to your point about guys not leaving and being here for multiple years. But I also think we struggle to put into perspective what we thought about teams that ended up having good depth before the depth showed itself, right? Like I use this example all the time 2 years ago with the offensive line, where at one point they were down 3 starters and it ended up being fine, right? Nobody going into that season would have said the offensive line had good depth. We were horrified that we couldn't find 5 starters, right? But we ended up playing 8 different guys or 9 different guys starting in positions on the offensive line that year. And so you look in retrospect, you're like, oh, man, that was a deep offensive line because they were still functional 9 deep. So I think I think when we talk about depth, like that's really a hard perspective to have because, look at Riley Van Poppel. If we knew Riley Van Poppel was about to have the year that junior year Ty Robinson is, we'd all feel fine. But we didn't know junior year Ty Robinson was going to have that year either.
Yeah. Yep.
I get it.
I don't know. There's not a question in there. I just ranted.
No, it's a good point. And, well, you were talking about the O-line, and I mean last year is a great example.
Yeah,
like Gatula pops in and played really well for that circumstance as a redshirt freshman, and now I guess one of the biggest points of optimism when I was over there Monday, I was looking at the interior and I'm like, okay, Latovsky looks as great as he's ever looked.
Yeah.
Latovsky, Evans, Spindler is your interior. And I'm like, that's nice. Like that's a nice looking three to set the table. And then you got your bookends, and there's a great competition where someone's got to really freaking earn that job. Like it's not going to be easy because you had Gatula out there working at left. Pritchett's obviously a guy they brought in with that role in mind. Right side, Tyler Kanak has had a great offseason and is playing the position now that he feels most comfortable at right tackle. And then Teddy P's out there and seems to be testing well and back to good numbers that suggest he can make a move. And so when you look at those guys and then you think about the Grant Brickses and those type of Jason Machachaks coming up, you're like, I like how that's happening on that O-line, and that's where it all starts, obviously, to play winning football. So that was what I walked away Monday thinking. I feel great about the interior, and the competition at the tackle spots is going to be so intense that I would suspect they get something good out of it.
Yeah, imagine like if you're just, and I know sometimes people like the cynics or not, because they're not always the same. Sometimes fan bases here, you talk about body types and the way guys look, and then they kind of give you the eye roll. Oh, just win. And it's like, well, in the meantime, you got to be in the lab, right? And you have to at least look the part. Riley and Frost had the infamous lines about looking like or not looking like a Big Ten team, right?
Right.
But just imagine, and I don't think you have to extrapolate too far. If Van Poppel, Keona Davis, who you saw the other day, goodness.
Monster.
Williams and Winari.
Lenhart
looks good. Judy's a 300-pounder. Like, imagine if you just said, hey, Van Pop, Keona, and Winari, like, you guys get off the bus first, right? And then you go stand next to Latovsky and Spindler and Pritchett. Like, that at least looks like a Big Ten team. And a lot of those guys that I mentioned, we know can play. Like, that's the difference.
Yeah. It looks like a Big Ten team, and I think back to some other preseasons, we had to talk ourselves into it looking like a Big Ten team.
I agree.
I mean, I can remember, or this is going back, but it's been this. It was this way for a while. Where like, was it DeAndre Thomas? I think as a true freshman had to like start it. So there was somebody like that who had to start like or he was playing key snaps at D tackle at Oregon in that game in 2017 as a true freshman, like playing like the nose almost, undersized, and like good player in the long run, but there just weren't enough parts then.
It's
and
just
what you're talking about, you're talking about like with Keona and some of these guys, there is a difference between how they look and how some of those teams maybe 5-6 years ago looked. But as you say, I mean, it all looks good on paper. It looks good at a first glance. And now a lot of it's just going to be mentality, like with this team. Like, do you have that right stuff they think they have? It sure sounds good. But are you going to have it when you face that first obstacle that's going to come early? I mean, Michigan's going to hit you in the mouth at some point. Cincinnati could hit Nebraska in the mouth in Arrowhead. And we're going to have to see, okay, all that stuff for the last 8 months you've worked off the field and on to be that team with chemistry. Is it going to show in that moment?
That's our guy, Brian Christopherson, Husker247. BC, appreciate the time as always. Great stuff.
Sizzle. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.